People click on the video. Why is he wearing those fun glasses? He looks like a chia pet or something like that.
Okay, keep them on then, at least for the first few seconds.
Yes.
Cool. Today we're talking about newspapers. And we have a newspaper to read in the park.
Yes.
Which is exciting.
We're not just talking about newspapers. We are talking about all forms of news media. We're talking about paper. We're talking about audio. We're talking about video. And we're talking about dudes. So it's kind of, welcome back to Solacene, everybody. This is a podcast that imagines a beautiful, sustainable, tactile future. We're recording outside again, which today I'm more excited for than last week even, because we've kind of remedied some of the issues from last week.
We brought tissues.
Bug spray, because I was getting eaten alive, as the old folks say. I would say as the kids say, but I think that's a grown-up thing. And we made the resolution to indeed cut on certain occasions, because we were very excited about, we're going to go an hour unfiltered, no safety rope, but then airplanes.
Whenever an airplane would go overhead, it would just be like...
Yeah. So we will cut on that occasion this week, and also guys.
Yeah, we were facing a trail last week, so we had to have blocks covering everyone that walked by. But now we just rotated about 45 degrees, and now there's no one behind us.
Indeed, there was that one guy who just stopped and just in the corner of the frame just watching for about a minute. So shout out to him, special guest star, unintended guest star. And today we're going to be, what are we doing? We're kind of pontificating on the journey of how news is distributed and drawing lessons to try and determine or imagine how it could be in an ideal world, because it's useful to have such ideals.
Such a North Star. I
drew up this little timeline, which is from kind of slowest to fastest. I don't like wearing this. No. I don't want to. We know they don't work on you. Which you said is basically the timeline of like the technological advancement of the news.
Yes.
So we start with a guy.
The bard,
the herald, someone out on the street just shouting, with or without a trumpet, preferably with. And then we go to print in, the 1600s, 1500s, somewhere around there?
1500s,
Radio. When was that? A few years ago? 2000?
Yeah.
Then we go to television, and then we go to the internet, and then on, we don't even want to think about that. But those are the 5 kind of touch points, and obviously it's not comprehensive, but I think it's useful. So we're starting with the most peculiar, the most outdated, and of course, the funniest.
The one that you resonate with the most, perhaps.
I could see that as a profession of mine if I was in like Renaissance times or medieval times.
The runner.
Yeah, I could run between towns.
Yeah.
Actually, I was a runner just before we recorded this.
Did run all the way home to grab bug spray.
Yeah.
We don't live that far at all, though.
Because I kind of angrily said, this isn't going to work without bug spray. This just isn't going to, because we were standing in this shrub for about 20 seconds, and I got about 20 bites.
Yeah, the mosquitoes are strong today.
It's nice. So what do you think about the Herald? What do you think about that time? Should it come back?
No.
No.
I think that it's fun in theory, and it just seems highly unreliable.
We saw someone on the street wearing a propeller hat.
We did.
And for some reason, those two things seem analogous in my mind. Because I think the Herald is probably quirky.
Yeah.
They maybe wear a notable outfit or hats. I mentioned the trumpet. I have a poem.
Okay, excellent.
Because I do think this is obviously mostly a meme suggestion for the sake of, being somewhat comprehensive, but there's not too many practical lessons we can take from it.
No, I don't think so.
But it can still be illustrative, even if it's obsolete. So the poem says, "That shadowy herald, who squawks each dawn the news I cannot understand. Down he feathers, loud and smiling, knowing, whitely, birdly happenings. Up he soars to other folk, whoever feeds him seed and lets him run amok, in exchange for tidings they find pretty. Bang! He's shot just over the bay. Someone will ask me where I was that day."
Wow. Good poem.
Thanks, I wrote it myself yesterday, and it was inspired by this thing which I think is kind of charmingly outdated, which is, I feel like in the 1900s, people were always talking about, oh, I remember where I was the day that happened. Maybe 9/11 is the last thing that happened
I
for.
think Michael Jackson's death.
Do you think that was a death knell?
Yeah, that's what I remember, because I remember where I was.
Everyone remembers where they were when Messi won the World Cup.
Maybe. Maybe for those.
We remember.
We do.
But it's always boring. It's always, I was watching it on TV.
Yeah.
Unless you were in Qatar. Is that question relevant? Why do you think that's changed? Why do you think people don't do that anymore? I thought that was kind of a conversation starter.
I suppose there aren't any monumental events.
So because there's no like unified culture anymore. There is no Michael Jackson to...
Exactly. And it's almost like, 9/11 was obviously huge and tragic and news spread really fast. But now it's like things like that are happening every day. And so people are weary of it. We're going to talk about this when we get to the internet part.
So you mean everyone is kind of always at a constant state of anxiety following the news, or like a heightened state? So some big event happening, Trump being elected, for instance, doesn't necessarily spike you out of it because you're already conditioned by social media, that is?
Yeah, I'm thinking just in the last few years, there was like Trump was elected, there was the start of the war in Ukraine, but like I don't remember where I was when I heard that was announced, but that's like huge.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. News hasn't gotten any less extreme.
Yeah.
That's the nature of the world. But individual events maybe feel a bit less seismic, or maybe that's just a very sheltered view of the world because we are lucky enough not to have had anything happen to us. I'm not sure.
Yeah, maybe we're like, our empathy had to be turned off in order to like survive, because we're not in New York. Most people who like heard about 9/11 weren't in New York, but they felt this like empathy for their fellow American or North American, even in Canada.
Or person.
Yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I think that's basically it. I think we're just more cynical now. I think we're less kind of bright-eyed and innocent. I mean, you and I obviously. It's awkward because we're only 20-something. So it's not like we've had a change over the course of our life.
Yeah. It's just
but
always...
as a people, like generation by generation, we're becoming less. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I think so. Honestly, I feel like we're going to focus very like European on the news history, because there's like a huge history of news circulation in China. Like it was like 500 BC they had newspapers.
So you mean
that
this timeline I've created is very Eurocentric?
Yeah, I think it is, just as a disclaimer, and it's like interesting to read about other countries and areas.
What else are we talking about? Oh, I forgot carrier pigeons.
Yeah.
Maybe that counts. Maybe that counts as heralds though. Well, my herald was a bird.
Your herald was, there you go.
Speaking of which, our task for this week,
yes,
completely irrelevant to the subject matter, or maybe not. I should have chosen a carrier pigeon. Was for me to try and name a bird which exists in this park, find one, and you to try and find a plant. I hear a lot of birds. I don't see many great blue herons. Apparently they are here.
What?
But I'm guessing they're wading birds and they eat fish, so I'm guessing they're in the
coast.
in the pond.
Oh.
They're here in this park.
In the park?
Yes, they visit this park. There's over 180 species that visit this park.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
but I have the Bohemian waxwing.
Ooh, I know those.
I think what do they look like?
They're like soft.
What color?
Yellowy gray?
Yeah, they're gray. They're light gray. And what's the accent color they have around their face and also their underside a little bit?
Oh, I don't know.
Guess.
I guessed yellow.
No, it's red, rusty.
Red.
They're called blushing. They're blushing because they have these black masks. They're very fat, and I just really like the name because I think if I was to have a nickname, perhaps a superhero name, or indeed a bird name, it would be the Bohemian waxwing. Yeah.
You're a bohemian in many ways.
Thank you.
My challenge last week was to get a plant species in the park, and I chose these ones right here with like the big leaves. I don't know if you can see it.
Oh, is this wart something?
No, that is the common burdock. So it looks like rhubarb, and people often get it confused, but because these stalks, as it grows, are like a little red on the bottom. But it's an invasive species, and it is really bad because it takes over everyone's gardens in Quebec and Ontario. I
thought that was a liverwort. I don't know why I thought that.
It looks similar, but this is bigger.
Oh, okay.
So yeah,
What's it called again?
Common burdock. So like it grows up to those maybe common thistle.
Uh-oh.
Maybe they're like they're the same. It goes up to those thistles with like the purple heads.
Let's just do the liverwort. I'm sure we have them.
Yeah, exactly.
What's this tree? See, this is our problem. It's probably the most basic common tree that you can find.
I don't know.
I like it. You were touching it earlier.
I was touching it earlier.
Grounding or earthing.
Earthing.
And yet, I'm going to call it a pine. No, pines are evergreen. An oak. I think this is a mighty oak.
Oaks have round leaves.
Oh.
Anyway.
So
a little bit more about the oral tradition of news, because I wanted to reminisce days gone by about the different things that they would announce, because right now the news announces everything. It announces the weather, it announces the elections, sports. But what the bards or the heralds were spreading was often calls to arms. Oh. So if there was like a need for people to go to war, they would announce that, because otherwise how do you find out?
Well, they were the right-hand man of the people in power.
Exactly.
That's kind of something else I noted. As we get more technologically advanced, at least in theory, we become more transparent and it becomes more trustworthy.
Yeah.
Because the herald, that could have been anyone. And they could have been saying complete lies, and probably often was.
They were. They were the ones that were basically just making up sensational stories.
Like ghosts.
Like, be careful, there's a new plague of ghosts or whatever.
Yeah.
And then they would also announce new rules, like from the government, new decrees. And like the pharaohs had these traveling announcers. Caesar infamously had like a band of these people to go and like disseminate his ideas and his rules to everyone. And I think you say things got more liberal.
I didn't say that.
Or what did you say? That they got more...
ostensibly more transparent and more trustworthy.
And I think this is going to be one of my themes for today, is how it got like, yes, more transparent, but not necessarily more trustworthy.
Okay.
Because like, yes, this is super centralized. It's more of a monarchy than anything, because it's even just like one person. And like infamously with broadcasting and newspapers, like there's only a few people that actually distribute them. Like it's very centralized. But I think at least in like the early days of newspapers, they had to be legitimized. They had to be like published with authority. So you couldn't publish lies or like anything sensational. But obviously now you can publish anything, lies, sensational, or the truth that is actually transparent, and it makes it kind of hard for people to sift through, and perhaps we don't want to even sift through it, we just disengage.
So you're saying you would prefer a herald?
Not a herald.
Okay.
But maybe...
What about a band of heralds, a roving band of heralds?
Maybe.
Is a bard, is there any, obviously they're not spreading the news, they're spreading stories, songs and poetry. We attended a really invigorating and exciting, I'm going to call it a bard session.
It was a fringe performance.
Yeah, in Montreal they have a fringe festival, and it was called The Death of Homer, which we were excited about because I'm quite a Homerite. And it was just some guy talking, telling a story, some of it improvised, or a lot of it, I couldn't tell, about Homer. And it was kind of this, continuation of the oral tradition. We need more of that, for sure.
Yeah.
Also, I was reminded of a film called News of the World featuring Tom Hanks.
I've been thinking about that all preparation.
Which I think we were the only two who watched.
Yeah, I didn't want to go there.
Because it was COVID time, released in the cinema, and we wanted to go to the cinema because we hadn't been because it was COVID time. And so I stomached one of my nemeses, Tom Hanks.
Yeah.
Not a big Hanks boy.
He is probably your nemesis.
Something about him I don't trust, I don't like. But this film was about him in the Wild West, traveling as a news reader because he was the only literate person. And that just struck me also how kind of, he could have just been lying. He could have just been making everything up.
Wasn't it the plot of the movie that eventually he realized he could make up stories and people would like it more?
It doesn't surprise me. Knowing Hanks, it doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. Knowing Chet Hanks doesn't surprise me.
Let's not mention Chet on this podcast. Moving on to print.
PA.
What do you think about newspapers? Print.
Newspapers feel like I like them the most out of all mediums of news. Perhaps you're more of a radio guy. I, even this morning when reading this newspaper, realized that my attention span just like increased by probably 30%.
Yeah, I wrote this down. I said, I think it's instinctively the most soul-scene format.
Yeah.
But I was kind of trying to pick holes in it. Like, is it just nostalgia? Is that kind of an unfounded affinity that we have for it?
I was thinking about that, and it's like, we never got the paper. If I was going to have nostalgia for anything, it would be radio or TV. Like, we watch the TV every morning for the news. So I don't think it's necessarily that. I think I'm being objective, and that paper is the best, besides, obviously, the environmental impact of it.
So what did you like about reading it?
It was curated for me, but there were still choices. Mm-hmm. Like, we have here the opinion section, but it's the Globe and Mail. It came with, this was like the worst part, and I think it's probably a modern thing. It had like all these different sections, all like loose.
Yeah, it wasn't put together like a normal newspaper would be. It kind of made you shake your head and tut while you read it.
Yeah, but anyway, we have the opinion, and so there's stories about caring for people in recovery, about like nursing, about the electoral system, in saving downtowns. Like, you still have choice, right, the way that you would on a news site, but it's only from today.
So you don't think you would just sit through and read it all?
I might, if it's well written, and it was generally well written as well. I think they have to be a bit more choosy versus online when they just kind of publish everything.
Well, it's finite.
Yeah.
Those are the three F's I had: finite, felt, curated.
Okay. That's a stretch.
Well, you said I didn't know another F word for that.
Yeah.
Finite, because obviously the space is limited, so you kind of have to be careful. There's infamously with headlines where they shorten words because they've only got a limited amount in the banner space. Felt, because you can.
It's the only tactile one.
You can smell it and touch it and use it for your fish and chips and for your paper mache, as you mentioned last week. Or, I don't know, make an airplane out of it, make clippings, as you mentioned, and curated, because the editors have to assemble each day what they think is worthwhile, what they think is relevant. Mm-hmm. And I was kind of contrasting this with the algorithms that we'll talk about later. I was like, which is better? Because the algorithms everyone hates, or everyone always criticizes, they lead us into these echo chambers, and they make everyone more radical or more insular, which is true, I think. But with the newspapers, when you go to the stand and everyone just picks out their paper, people aren't, it's not like they're trying a different thing every day.
That's true.
They find theirs, and then even in that, well, he just reads the finance every day.
Yeah.
Is it that different? That's what I was wondering.
It's not that different, especially, because some of them are so sensational. When I went to the magazine store, because basically in Montreal, the only place you can buy papers reliably are these stores that just sell newspapers, magazines, and some books.
That's another thing. We need dudes on the sidewalk. If we're going back to newspaper times, which it seems like to some extent we will be, or should be, you need little kids. I'm not saying put kids to work, but I'm saying put young teens to work. Make them labor. Give them those hats. Extra, extra. That should be the thumbnail, me with one of those hats. You holding the newspaper, or both of us brandishing it and saying, extra, extra, extra. Read all about it.
Well, last week the recommendation was to watch the Newsies, and that's what it's all about.
That's what those kids are?
Yeah, they're Newsies that sold the
Except
newspapers.
Obviously on the stage they are 45 years old.
Yeah, it's a little creepy. Creepy.
But yeah, that selection, self-selection and the curation, is it that different from your TikTok FYP algorithm or your Reddit algorithm? I guess it is different, because the algorithm increases, whereas this one, you go to the center left when you start reading the Globe and Mail or the Guardian or something like that, and you stay there. It probably doesn't take you much further, I'm guessing.
Yeah,
I don't know.
True.
I mean, I guess something to get meta with it, all the people writing for the newspaper, if they are on TikTok and stuff, then their writings will...
That's interesting.
But we're talking in a land of ideals where everyone reads a newspaper.
And I think by localizing newspapers a bit more, it would solve a little bit of the problem. There would still probably be local left-wing, local right-wing newspapers, but it'd be reporting on the same stories, and you'd have some kind of grounding in reality with them. So we gave the example last week of the encampment at McGill, and how like you could read a left-wing story and a right-wing story about it, but you could also just go and see it.
Yes.
And kind of realize that both sides are maybe sensationalizing a bit or making it seem like things are more intense than maybe they are. Maybe they're like they are just peaceful and.
Whereas with federal politics, all you have to rely on is what you're told. You can't go and see it. I also think local publishers, local newsstands, local writers, local editors, there is someone to hold to task. There's someone to follow up with, to protest, to send a letter to the editor.
Yeah.
Letter to the editor. When was the last time? People don't really do that anymore.
No.
I took issue with this because this. I like, if you have criticism, articulate it, be polite, try and make a change maybe.
I also was thinking with newspaper, it is a distinct medium from the other ones because it's tactile, as we said, but it also uses photos, whereas radio didn't use photos, oral didn't use photos, and broadcasting and social more use video. So it's kind of like unique in that sense of it uses photos. And what about like comic strips?
Yeah, the funnies.
It uses art. It has those little crosswords.
Why do you think photos, well, you didn't say it's better, but why do you think it stands out from using video?
Well, video is obviously engages more of the senses,
Yeah.
which I think will create a stronger response. But the photo is also like you have to capture what you're trying to say in a still image. I mean, both of us, I don't want to say we're photographers, but like we had this photography phase.
Yeah, I
we
think there
are
are
still
people.
photographers at heart. And I think what we love about photography is trying to capture 5 senses in one, which is just visual and like static.
Yeah.
So it takes a bit of choice, and like let's just use the one on the cover as an example. So, and I'll also use this headline. So we're gonna choose one headline every week. On the cover of this Globe and Mail opinion piece, there's a picture of a kid with one of those, what are they called,
Tesla coils, I think.
Tesla coils that make all your hair stand up, and it's called "It Was Yours to Discover."
It's nice.
So it's like this combination of the photo and the headline, and you kind of assume, at least in Canada, we have these things called discovery centers or science centers. And so you kind of assume that with this image from the 50s and this headline that it's going to be talking about. So they chose to use this image from the 50s, which is evocative of that kind of sciencey, futuristic age in which people were really optimistic about the future. And they could have used a new picture of the science center that they're trying to talk about, but they didn't. They chose an old one because they're trying to say this has been here for a long time. Basically, what this article is about is that the Ontario government shut down the Ontario Science Centre, which was like a fixture for 60, 70 years.
Do we blame Rob Ford?
You do blame Rob Ford, unfortunately.
Typical.
And they're shutting it down because they said it's in a bad location, it's not safe or something like that. But then the person writing this is actually, he worked there for 26 years and he is a writer for the Globe and Mail now. And he was saying it was safe. There was like a leak in the roof, that was it. And what they want to do is move it into the downtown area. But what was really cool for this guy, his name is Ivons, who wrote the piece. He said that growing up, he was in like a low-income neighborhood and a low-income family, but he wouldn't have known it because he felt so privileged, and just like, as a kid, it was just so wonderful to be able to walk to the science center in this like low-income neighborhood. But they obviously don't want it out there because it's like, oh, we can't give it to these poor kids. We should give it to the rich kids in the city or whatever. And so Ivons was saying if they moved it to where they want to move it, it would take them 3 hours by transit to get there. And Ontario also is infamously bad for its transit. So it's just this whole like cycle thing. But this image of like a kid in the 50s, all the parents crowding around laughing, like it's just a strong image. And I think it shows this sense of artistic eye that maybe doesn't exist in any of the other mediums of news communication, because you have to like format this whole front cover, or even like any page. It's like a piece of art kind of, whereas everything else is always moving, flashing lights, etc.
Yeah, I really like that. We've experienced that a little bit making our own zines. Not a plug for them, but because they're not topical, they're not daily or whatever, but you do spend a lot of time formatting because this will be static, but it will last forever.
Yeah.
So he wanted to age well. And I do appreciate that about newspapers. I think it'd be fun to be an editor for a day. I think for a life, it'd be terrible.
Yeah.
This article seems like a perfect cross-section of Solacene interests.
Well, basically, because there were 3 different opinions on it, and one person did this whole column talking about how it was tactile.
Yeah.
Which I thought was really funny and very Solacene, because that's one of our tenets.
3 different opinions on the same news story?
Yeah.
I like that.
I like it too.
That's a good idea.
Yeah.
Maybe that's what op-ed sections are, I don't know.
Yeah.
But that's a good idea.
But this guy was talking about how, when he was a kid, he could have been sucked into the void, because he's like our age, he's Gen Z, and he was saying he was fortunate because he was able to go once a month or more to the science center and like engage hands-on with these concepts, and it made him interested in science and just in the real world, is what he kept saying. He's like, I was glad and thankful to have had an interest in the real world, which like kids don't necessarily get growing up in cities.
Yeah. Okay, so you can read this kind of stuff, blogs, on the internet. Mm-hmm. But I don't want to.
I don't want to either.
I find when I have it in my hand, I'm infinitely more likely to read it, to remember it, and enjoy it. And especially read about things. I guess the thing with the internet is I'm not going to read something I don't want to, or that I didn't search for, most likely.
Yeah.
Whereas a newspaper, that's why I say it's curated. You have an element of trust in the Globe and Mail. So you say, well, if they're highlighting this, must be interesting. And you read things about the Ontario Science Centre, which is not like I'm ever going to read about that unless it's delivered to me or in a neat package like this. Yeah, there are 3 articles on it.
Yeah. It's cool.
Photos. It's nice.
Yeah.
Or I'm not going to read about this adventurer from the Royal Canadian Geographical Society and her adventures photographing Antarctica. But now I have it in front of me. It sounds like the most interesting thing in the world.
I know.
So, and it makes you a more well-rounded human like that. All the things that are, all the benefits of reading, vocab, concentration.
It makes you think about your own opinions and your own, how would you take these things. And one thing I wanted to mention with the papers is that they kind of started that 24-hour news cycle, because they used to have morning, afternoon, and evening papers. Yeah. Which that's like a bit much.
I wanted to mention that as well, that we can't just praise it, because almost all the journalistic bad traits that people are born now started in the newspaper era. Mm-hmm. The clickbait race to the bottom, let's call it.
The advertising. And apparently 2/3 of their income comes from ads, and only 1 from sales. Yeah,
just a general kind of systematically corrupt journalism that started with print. But in Solacene, obviously, there's none of that.
Yeah.
None of that. We're just talking about the formats here. We're mostly talking about that.
Exactly.
And for that, we will take the fish and chip receptacle. My new thing on the pod is I will try and sound English.
Okay.
Right then, so now we're talking about the radio.
The babies say.
The babies. Radio. When's the last time you listened to radio news? Not just the radio par accident.
I don't remember, to be honest. I guess when I was a kid, we used to listen to it every day on the way to school.
Yeah.
And pray that they would announce that school was cancelled.
School was cancelled.
Yeah.
That was the main thing, because for some reason, when you're living in an area where snow days, you get, 5 to 10 a year, and those are the best days of your life each time.
Yeah.
And you're crowded in the morning listening to it. It was the only time we ever used our kitchen radio to listen to to news, not just the music. Because for some reason they got it very slightly quicker than the television. Mm-hmm. Always. So yeah, we listened to CKBW, shout out.
Okay.
And we got it like that. But now I think radio is cars.
Radio is also completely soulless now, at least in North America.
Why?
Because basically growing up we had CKEC, our local radio.
It's got to start with CK.
Yeah.
That's, like here it would be like CKMQ or something like that.
Yeah. So we had CKEC, but then it was bought out by Stingray.
No!
And so now it's recorded in Halifax. We didn't live in Halifax.
In this city,
so
in the main city.
Nova Scotia, yeah. It was like every little community had its radio station, which was highly useful. Announce birthdays, announce school canceled. Now it's just all in the main city.
We'll get specific ranty here, but even Halifax's own, even their biggest pop music radio station, The Bounce, everyone knows The Bounce, got bought out by Virgin Radio.
Yeah.
And now you got Ryan Seacrest reading the top 40. He's not in Halifax.
Yeah.
It's a crying shame.
That's just on the death of radio. I think radio is great. We love radio.
Weep. Why?
Because we are radio. That's why we started a podcast, because we like
the
idea of people just listening and not having to look at anything. It's kind of passive.
The Solar Scene radio show. That's
CKSW.
My attempt. We hate video, that's why we go to the lengths to record outside and edit and upload on YouTube.
Not that we hate video, but I just think it's nice to be able to listen to the radio or to a podcast while you're cooking dinner. But you still should be intentional about it.
My note on this radio is that it makes you think.
Yeah.
It's the most, in my opinion, in my experience, the most sit around and consume together and then discuss medium that there is. Because I think because it's only the one sense, it sparks the imagination in ways. So they'll say like, and in today's news, Walmart announced that they will be opening 7 new stores or something like that.
Yeah, you hear it on your drive to like the grocery store
and then
and
you're
like,
oh, where are they going to be? What's this?
Yeah.
And on the television, it would be accompanied with stock footage of Walmart or the construction or the plans for the stores or something.
Yeah.
So you get that extra information, which kind of satisfies your curiosity immediately. I think the radio, this sounds maybe a little bit anti-intellectual, but I like the way that it gives you effectively the headlines, some details around it, but the rest it lets you conspire about with the people you're listening to.
Yeah, and that's how the internet is also really different from all these other forums, that you can instantly get supplemental material.
You don't ask any questions.
And also that the people writing it knows that. They know they can just throw in a weird word or a weird concept and like you can just Google it or like highlight, look up, whatever.
Yeah.
And that means that I feel like people are worse.
We are worse.
Writers on the internet.
Last week I kind of praised that because I said there was a word I didn't know, and so I went to another tab and searched it. But I suppose that's a level of intentionality, plus I'm already in the mode of trying to increase my vocabulary, so...
That's true.
Yeah, maybe if it had just been a date, I wouldn't have remembered that. Where do you think radio should be? If right now it's tied to cars, or as we disaffectionately term them, stink chariots,
Yes.
where do we want radio to be? Listening on the phones like pods? No.
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 I like the morning radio. I feel like you could choose your fighter. Choose if you want to be a morning paper or a morning radio, or evening, honestly.
Yeah, but where?
I have pictured in the kitchen.
I love a kitchen radio. I don't know
Picture
why.
in the kitchen. And so I think a kitchen radio. Bedroom, no.
We should have brought our radio. We have the newspaper. I should have had the radio.
Oh.
We have a cartoon Fisher-Price radio, which kind of works.
Kind of, yeah. It's probably like 50 years old. Like
Yeah.
It's very vintage and kind of works, yeah. So in the kitchen. I don't like it necessarily in the living room because then it's just like, yeah. I like the multitasking of the radio.
But
and
in public, do you think they should be in the workspace, in the grocery store, in a cafe?
I think in grocery stores, yes. Cafes, no.
Too wordy for cafes.
Yeah, and maybe I'm picturing when you're like in the mall, perhaps, but that's even more music-y.
I love the idea of a radio show. Every 9 p.m., everyone tunes into such and such, or the midnight radio host who's, mixing people's nights away. Or I was thinking about something that would work really well, obviously, because it's audio, is music releases. Everyone's really excited now. Oh, Thursday midnight, so Friday, the new Taylor Swift comes out or something. What if we do a special, and we're going to play it in full here, we're going to talk about it before, maybe have a little note between each song.
Yeah.
And then even if people aren't physically together, which is the ideal, around the town, they're not just listening to their Spotify and then checking the YouTube comments to see what the reaction is at the same time.
Reminds me of the last time that Taylor Swift, I guess this was a few weeks ago, released an album. That morning, every cafe I went into, every little store, everyone was playing it.
Oh, that's
but
nice.
it was on their Spotify's. It wasn't on a radio, so it's cool. It would have been cool if it had been listening to the same commentary or what have you.
The phone-in radios. Did you ever want to phone in, or did you ever do that?
I have phoned in.
What?
Our radio channel had every morning on your way to school trivia. And if you phoned in, you could get, I want to say it was a free Dairy Queen ice cream cake if you won, or a free pizza. It was like one of the two.
It has to be like hilariously small scale a gift.
Yeah, of course.
Get a free signed pencil.
But I was like so excited because I won a couple times.
A couple times?
Yeah.
How often were you playing this?
Well, every morning.
Oh, but you were using a cell phone.
Well, sometimes we'd have to use the landline.
Oh.
Because it was like for my whole childhood, so like cell phones weren't a thing.
What kind of trivia? Just general?
I'm trying to even remember an example because it's like weird that I would know anything.
You were Googling, weren't you?
No, I would never Google.
Good.
Because I remember one day when kind of the transition to like, oh, people have cell phones, they have Google. I remember being super concerned and asking my mom, like, what's going to stop people from cheating? And she's like, people won't cheat, like they're good. And then people probably cheated and they stopped doing it. So yeah, I think it was often just like local trivia of like, what's the name of this place in the corner of these two streets? Or sometimes it would just be like, what's the capital of this country? Or
Yeah.
Just like really fun
like
and
it.
easy. Yeah.
I like it. Radio. Bring it back. I was
Super
also
cool.
thinking along the lines, along its place in the spectrum of trustworthiness, it's maybe quite good for fake news. Anyone could, if we're talking in our age of decentralized radio, everyone could grab a little microphone and satellite, kind of like we're doing right now,
Yeah.
and just spout some nonsense. I think Orson Welles kind of famously poked at this with his alien invasion radio thing that people believed. And maybe, I don't really want to mention the words, but in the age of AI and content, and people's voices being stolen, the good thing
Yeah.
about print is that even if every word in this was not written by a human, at some point it entered the real world. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's true.
By another's hand.
Yeah, it
something
could
like
just
that.
be, yeah, radio is really unique in that way that it could just be,
Could be anything.
yeah.
Like that's
I
what I was saying
lis-
about the Ryan Seacrest ones. They're all pre-recorded,
Yeah, exactly.
but they were masking it off as live.
Probably could have been Ryan Seacrest's just AI. Why would he want to actually record anything? And I was listening to a podcast about voice recognition in like in the age of AI. Highly recommend it. It's on a podcast called 20,000 Hertz. Just look up their episode about AI voices because it's interesting of how fine a margin it is. And I think it could have, I mean, that was a few months ago, so it could have already been ironed out
Yeah.
of like, I just don't think it will be doable to recognize.
No, of course not.
Yeah.
That's why this is getting a side tangent, but I despise when people criticize AI, generative AI, by saying, oh, it's garbage. It's like, well, ChatGPT writes, but it's terrible writing. It's like, that's not why you should hate it, because in 6 months it won't be terrible.
Yeah.
You should hate it for other reasons. You should really despise it for other reasons and not make its quality the thing that you hang your hat on and criticize. Anyway, TV, yeah. What do we think radio is good for?
Radio is
Local
good.
news. Is that what we're saying?
Local news, just like local celebrity. I don't know.
Local celebrity?
I feel like you could meet and learn about
Billy the
people.
Clown opens his new show, that kind of thing?
Yeah, like I remember my dad had a advertisement on a local radio channel
He did.
for his company, and it was like his voice or my mom's voice. Like, and it's just like funny. It's like, so people like heard him talk.
Yeah.
And it's like you can put an ad in a paper or whatever.
But that's somehow more interesting than if a video of him had been played on the local news.
Yeah, I
That's
agree.
interesting too, but there's something disembodying about the voice that you're just floating.
Yeah.
Like, I guess the same as podcasts.
Yeah. My dad was also on the TV news once, but not for his business. He was like performing a song
Oh.
when I was really little. And I remember my mom being like, okay, it's on. Because like he was away, like he was in the studio
Yeah.
doing it live. And I was like, I was really young. And I remember being so excited.
Were
that
you
he
ever
was
on the news TV?
I don't think I was ever on the TV, no.
I'm thinking about that. For some reason in my head, I have the memory of that similar waiting for it to happen and then it happening, but I have no clue what it was.
I don't know what it would have been.
Anyway,
Were you ever in the paper?
I don't know.
I was in the paper.
I don't think so. I'd like to be published in the paper one day.
Well, yeah, as a writer. But my picture is in the paper as the poster child for the library,
Do you still have it?
which tracks. My mom has it, yeah.
You should make that your profile pic.
Yeah. It was me like sitting, there was a story time every Thursday. or
How old
something,
were you?
4 maybe?
Yeah.
I was very little.
We should
But
put that
as
on
you
the
said,
Solar
I
Sing
never
blog.
change.
Yeah,
So I looked
we look the same.
straight out of the womb. I looked the same.
Television. That's what TV stands for. Very easy to hate.
Yeah, I don't
Very
like.
easy punching bag, easy to detest. But I find there's something. This isn't really a but. And I find that the worst thing about it is there's something morbidly engrossing. It sucks you in. I find anyway, CNN, Fox, all that 24 hours. Sometimes it's on at the gym. I think it's the
But it
only
like
place that kind of stuff is
loops
played.
within like 15 minutes.
It loops, but I give it a, I won't say a hate watch, but a disgust watch. It makes me feel awful.
Okay.
But I kind of, I want to see what Anderson Cooper is saying about climate change today, or the Paris Accords, or something like that.
Okay.
I think on its scale of trustworthiness, that wasn't a compliment. It was an
No,
insult.
no.
It was
Yeah.
a criticism. Because it's so expensive to produce, it makes it very untrustworthy
Yeah.
and very sensationalized. And generally speaking, there is not much incentive to present the dry, neutral, black on white text facts.
I love
So-
this that we can just keep.
We have a prop. Keep touching.
I like it.
Every day we should bring every week we should bring a touch prop,
Beautiful. Let's do it.
aka prop.
Yeah. So the news that we watched every morning was Regis and Kelly
Who's
live from
your family.
New York, I think.
That's not news.
I know, but that's what we would watch.
That's like saying,
every morning.
oh, the healthy breakfast that we've got is sugar puffs.
Yeah, exactly. It was just always like nonsense. Like, did
Mm-hmm.
you see what?
Oh, celebrity news is what you're saying.
Yeah, it was like celebrity news every
Okay.
morning though. So that's what we had on, and yeah, I wouldn't even give it a hate watch anymore, a disgust watch. It disgusts me so much. I don't-
Jeepers.
But seriously though, like
We're sounding so inarticulate on this.
I remember during, the earthquake in Haiti.
The earthquake in Haiti.
Yeah,
Seminal moment in Alicia's life.
it was, and there was this,
One of your favourite songs was recorded then, of course.
of course.
Waving Flag.
Yeah, I was jamming to Waving Flag. But I remember just like, that was probably the last time that I was sucked into a news on TV.
2010.
Yeah. And just watching like the footage and the disaster, but it just kept rolling again and again and again. I know that that's like, probably 2010 was the last time that became such a, it was still novel, sort of.
The first viral disaster.
Yeah, like, but maybe we'll say the last viral disaster before the internet.
Okay.
Or like, because the internet was with, anyway. It was just like, it sucked me in, but then I remember thinking like, okay, now what? Like, give me, like, it just was presenting it to you, but no solutions, no calls for help even.
So you don't like that thing, people always say that, like, oh, the news is all just negative. That's what you don't like?
I don't like, yeah, and I always thought, oh, that's just people not looking at it. And then I hate,
What a hate
So
happening in this episode. Very hate-filled episode.
you know Mr. Rogers?
I disgusted.
You know Mr. Rogers?
I hate him.
I don't hate Mr. Rogers, but there's this thing that, like, his saying of, look for the helpers. And I hate how, in the age of Facebook, people try and be so positive about everything. But it's like, all these disasters that happen, they suck and they're negative. And it's like, it should be negative. They shouldn't be like, and here's a shot of the Red Cross. It's like, I just feel like we shouldn't be
So you think it should be
seeing
more
necessarily.
negative? I like this.
Perhaps,
Make
to an
it
extent.
make it worse.
But just a mix. So it's like, yeah, they just keep showing the same footage over and over again of the disaster. But it's like, maybe just show multiple stories.
It's that cynicism you were talking about from the start of the episode.
Because it's just like, I think, but like, just let it be negative. It sucks. It's negative. Don't try and spin it to be positive. But also show us a cool thing that's also happening in the world. And I don't think that's like necessarily me being like, oh, like so privileged that I can like escape it. But it's like, I think that would empower people and not make people so shut off.
Yeah, I had the thought about the TV news that it's almost too physically big, because everyone has a big TV these days.
That's true.
And cinematic a thing. And you can also maybe consider this in terms of like how big a presence it is in your life. So like if you blew television up to a crazy extreme, let's say every morning people went to this cinema to watch the news, that would be terrible.
Yeah.
it'll be terrible. Maybe it's the size of it and the motion of it, contrast to the words on the newspaper that don't change. And the example I had for this that I mentioned to you last night was the elections that they, as the results come in on election night, on voting night, they'll tell you about each riding. There'll be a guy in front of a big map pointing, and it's like a live sporting event or like gambling or entertainment thing where it's like, oh, is Florida going to flip red or blue? Or we just got results in from this city. And the way everyone gathers around to watch it, because I think they do watch parties like the Super Bowl or something. And contrast with a newspaper where the morning, I mean, I guess you get exit polls as well. I guess they have projections, but it's not real time. And then the morning afterwards you get Liberals won. And then it gets into details about which riding, how they won, how it contrasts to previous years, demographics, the same details that you get on television, but it's in recap rather than real time.
Yeah.
And I think that makes, for some reason, a big difference. I kept thinking this word, I think I said it a few times in last week's episode. I was thinking about this week about such and such is unhealthy. This is an unhealthy way to consume or follow the news, or this is healthy in contrast. And I was kind of trying to define that, like, what does healthy mean in this context? Is it just me having an aversion to it? Is it just my own preferences? And I think it can maybe be defined as if something is in the news detrimental or distracting from your daily life because of its speed or scope or language, if the language is a certain way, if it's very radical or very angry all the time or something like that, then it's probably unhealthy.
I agree.
Unless your daily life is in politics, and obviously you need to follow that.
For sure. I think also the reason that it's unhealthy is because it doesn't have a chance to gather all the facts or to think. I guess that'd be more dangerous than unhealthy.
But... Oh, you mean because you're footing around like this because, oh, I got really angry about this, but then they learned about the facts and now I'm more mellow. But if I just waited until everything was arranged by the Globe and Mail, then...
To just like present the facts to you and not be like, bang, 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 bang. These are all the things that are happening, developing second by second of like, there's been this bomb dropped. Oh my goodness, the people are da, da, da. And it's like, you don't actually know why these things happen because it's happening live. And I think radio had that live element, which is cool to an extent because I like live broadcasting because there's room for error and natural. It's a bit more naturalistic, but with live TV, I feel like they went with like we're on the scene, we're just like catching it, and it's like, just give us a sec. Like, think about the psychological impact of these images, and so on.
Radio has the live broadcast, but I don't think it emphasizes so much the live news, as in this is what's happening right now.
Because it still has to like get to the studio.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Internet. I termed this one the age of receipts, or the culture of receipts, because you know people say that. Oh, do you have the receipts? He or she came with receipts. And we were kind of bemoaning, this makes it sound really kind of anti-intellectual this week, people that are incredibly data-driven, and they base their every opinion and all their identity around what's been found and proven and they can pull up in an article. And I don't really want to get into that fully.
I have an example for that.
Okay.
So I was listening to this podcast, Will Kill You, and they have this series out now that they're working on about in vitro fertilization and like the fertility crisis and a bunch of things about fertility.
You're becoming a big podhead, aren't you?
I listen to a lot of podcasts.
I don't know if I like that.
Anyway, so it's not a podcast about fertility, it's just a podcast about medicine. But they were saying there just are not studies on so many of these the effects of the process on people psychologically, because obviously like when people go through the process of in vitro fertilization or other like assisted reproductive techniques, it's a pretty new thing. Like the first in vitro baby was born in the 70s, and so we don't know the psychology of just having a bunch of attempts that fail for one reason or another on the people or on the children. And they were saying like that doesn't mean it's bad, doesn't mean it's good, doesn't mean it's bad. It's just like, just because we don't have the studies doesn't mean we shouldn't keep trying, because it is being successful and the kids are turning out great psychologically. The parents are like, they're able to cope with it more than we'd think. Anyway, it was just like a bunch of different things about how there aren't all the studies yet, and people assume that means it's bad. And that's the case across a lot of medical things and just like social things of like, they assume if there's no proof that it's then a negative, but it's like, you can kind of go with like...
It's a fallacy.
Yeah, it's a
But
fallacy.
also, you can have opinions on things.
Yeah.
That's what I don't like. It's like, you can't have an opinion unless there's data to back it up, or science to back it up. It's like, but most things worth having an opinion on, I think, there is no science to back it up, because people tend to have opinions on cutting edge things, or things about the future.
Exactly, or just like things that maybe you don't need to prove. Like it's not a priority for anyone to prove like sitting in the grass is good for you. And it's like even with ancient traditional medicine, it's like people are like, whoa, they're catching up to say that yoga is good for you. It's like, we knew that yoga, like we knew that. Like,
so that's a good example, is that, well, science finds that actually these ancient people were right to go to the sauna or do yoga or something like that, or meditate. Science came around on meditation. So you can have an opinion on that just being historically informed and aesthetically informed and using your own experiences. You don't have to wait for science to catch up on that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, the internet, it's so varied that it's hard to lump. Radio is radio, newspaper is newspaper. The internet, you've got podcasts, you've got live streams, you've got social. You can just, I was saying, like, you can just watch a live feed of the ISS or a war zone or a zoo. For some reason on YouTube we got recommended that it's like an antelope in Africa, in like some plain on Africa, a nature reserve. It had about one viewer, us, and it was just the middle of the night. This antelope sleeping. We were like, this is fantastic but bizarre, is the word for it.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's good or not, but it's so weird.
It's cool, and I think social media and the internet, it's not my least favorite. TV is my least favorite, if you didn't notice. And I was thinking last week when we were talking about...
Well, what do you mean by social media? It's 1,000 different...
Well, I'm going to get to it. Last week we were talking about our ideal news consumption. And for me, I'll use Instagram as an example because that's the only social media that I use. It's cool that you can curate and you can find people who report on specific things that you are interested in, and you can like rotate it. So maybe I lose interest in, or like something is resolved.
Yep.
And so you kind of unfollow that person because it's not necessarily relevant to you anymore.
Twitter, I think people do the same.
Twitter, yeah. And I think that's really interesting. And I think it had a lot of, like the internet had a lot of potential for being a cool source of news. But because of AI and deep fakes and such,
very quickly,
I think it has just like, it has zero legitimacy anymore. And also just like bots on Twitter putting out spam comments or spam stories even.
Yeah. And
people, I was saying when I was reading, I was trying to find a headline for last week, and every news site I clicked on had just copy and pasted each other's stories, so you don't know the source. There's no sources in general. There's not any fact checking or filter the way that all the other ones kind of even have a filter because they were curated.
Well, print, it works entirely on some assumption of responsibility by the printers. So some trust the results.
Yeah.
I think among all those different internet forms, the traits I have to characterize them are: they stay around, they last, typically free or very accessible like that.
Yeah.
Typically personal, one person listening to it on a pod like you do with your headphones in, or watching it or scrolling on their IG, and typically very, very fast, if not real time. And so it's kind of like, I think it'd be really silly and basically being a Luddite to say, well, that's all bad. Obviously not. Like, you listen to pods, I will follow news on the internet. It has a lot of benefits, but I think it's kind of like, if you're picking and choosing where you get which news, what kind of news do you want to get in that manner? I.e., it sticking around, it being free, it being personal, and it being fast. Like, what do you value those things for, and what would you rather wait a day or a week for to get in a well-articulated and all the facts together and curated for you print form that you can touch and smell?
Yeah.
It's kind of like that.
I also was thinking a bit about, in Canada, there's a law that was passed, Bill C-18, for fair commercial deals, which led to Meta and I think Google now even blocking all news on social media. You can't see anything from a news outlet. And it was basically like...
How do you block news?
They won't, like, they just don't let you share it or see it.
But what if I just type?
You can type, but you can't repost or... Anyway, it was basically like this bill was passed in Canada and it was modeled after some European laws so that journalists would be paid because they've been having to work for free basically on their Twitters and their social medias. And that doesn't lead to fair press or good press or good journalism because they have to be quick and trendy and whatever. So Canada was trying to fix that by saying, okay, you have to pay for news. And it could have been that Meta pays the journalists for being on their platforms, but they chose not to pay them. And so they therefore are not allowed to post because of this law. And so basically my takeaway was social media and like internet news is cool, but we should still pay for it, I think.
Yeah, we probably should pay for it.
Yeah.
Something also I mentioned is all these other formats, all these other mediums, radio and newspapers and television, where do they get their news from? The internet.
Yeah.
They source everything because that's where it happens first.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like, for what kind of news do you personally prefer to have the primary source? If so, follow that journalist on Twitter. He or she will post it in real time, or just watch that live stream. That will be the cutting edge.
Yeah.
Or what do you want or what do you not mind having it or prefer having as a secondary source? For me, it's most things, because I value the way things are written and presented.
I agree. I think for me, it would be, the more dense things and the very light things. So like things that I would like on the internet are, for example, this podcast I was talking about the healthcare system and just like, it's fun for me to listen to like 4 hours on this one illness. I don't want to read a 200-page book on it, but I would like to just have it digitally. Those things that would be like, if you printed them, it would be a full book. It's kind of cool to listen to or consume on the internet.
Because it's infinite. They have no space qualms.
Exactly. And it's like, I'm going to read it once, I'm not going to reread it, so I don't want it in print. And trying to condense these concept things into like one column would also, like, that would be detrimental, I think. Or even to like a 20-minute radio broadcast. And because you don't want someone like pumping out a podcast on a radio channel. Like, if we were on a radio channel, it's like, not everyone's going to want to listen to it.
Yeah.
And then also the things on the internet would be like the weather or like maybe some movie reviews, things that like are they're like really small, but also again, for the movie reviews niche. It's like not everyone's going to want to go see the same movies as you.
Yeah, I have shouted out Letterboxd a few times on the podcast as the only social media that I properly use. And I've flipped back and forth about how good that is. My conclusion generally is that it is quite good and quite healthy because it actually makes me want to talk with film more with people in real life. It doesn't really scratch that itch, it more like creates it, I guess.
Yeah.
And part of the great thing about it is that I'm not relying on the Globe and Mail's in-house film reviewer. I can basically subscribe to some that I really appreciate, not necessarily like deliberately, sometimes with an eye towards a wide range of opinions. This is a little bit off topic, maybe we can talk about it next week, but I think it can be an ethos that becomes part of the Solacene schooling for children, is how to surround yourself with diverse opinions. Movies are a very benign example, but I try to find people who have differing opinions from mine, but present them respectably. And the weather's another good example because I kind of think it's a waste of space printed in the newspaper when we can see it daily. I'm not one for minute to minute, like, is it going to rain? Oh, I don't know, let me check the app.
It's like, just look outside.
You can look outside. But I think in terms of daily, that's just better than
Well,
than
during
news,
the
to my
intense
opinion.
semester, we got a thermometer,
We did.
put it in our window, do that.
There you go, get a thermometer.
Get one of those like barometric pressure tubes.
I have a Solacene recommends for this week.
Beautiful.
It's a movie called Evil Does Not Exist. I watched it at the cinema. It's a Japanese film, quite slow, but very thought-provoking, very beautiful, but not just pretty, if that makes sense, and very sustainably minded, but not preachy. I don't want to give too much away because that would be too spoilery. And also just Did you like that movie?
I didn't see that
Yeah, exactly.
Because you went with
Because you
them.
didn't want to go see it.
I wanted to go see it.
And also just your local cinema or local small independent cinema. Go there. We went there twice in a week, or I did, and one of my favorite places on
It's so nice.
the planet.
So nice.
Go and do that.
Yeah. So thank you all for listening. We'll be back next week with another outdoor news podcast. See you then.